Have you figured out your niche? Are you helping adding value to other people's lives? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to Munira's Musings with your host, Munira Zahabi.
Greetings from Chicagoland. This is Munira, the Niche Navigator, coming to you live from our guest from Seattle. Hi, Tracy. Welcome to Munira's Musings.
Hi, thanks.
You're welcome. So this show is all about putting it in perspective for people who are standing on the sidelines, who are thinking of doing something but not yet haven't done something or haven't got a clue about what that something is. And so by talking to people or experts in the field that they are in, it gives a little bit of perspective to people how they've overcome, what they've overcome to get to where they are today. And Munira's Musing airs every Monday with a new guest. We showcase a new guest, their qualities, their givings, their whatever they want to talk about, because it's all about giving, and this is a good way to put it in perspective. So if anybody out there who wants to listen, who is listening and wants to be on our show, please go ahead and just contact me. I'm booking dates now in August, so we're always ahead. We're looking for guests. If you have a perspective, an opinion, a niche to share, just show up. We'll talk to you. So without further ado, let's talk to Tracy. Tracy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, great. So I'm currently, as we mentioned, living in Seattle. I love the Pacific Northwest. It's been wonderful. I was originally born in New York, and so it's kind of fun to have that bi-coastal feel. I still have family in New York, which has been wonderful. But yeah, I always wanted to be a writer, always thought I would get published one day, but I kept on putting it off, thinking, well, when this happens, then I'll have time. Or when this lines up in my life, then I'll do this. And I realized that looking back on it, how I just put off my dream. And it wasn't until I ended up losing my job that I'd been at for 12 years, got cancer, and then lost my mom right after I'd been diagnosed. And it was all within about a 3 or 4 month period. So it was really a wake up call.
Yeah, when God gives, he gives it in abundance, right?
Exactly. I felt like he was saying, you know what? I want to make sure you're paying attention. I was like, message received. I got it.
So so you lost your job, you were diagnosed, and your mom passed away all within 3 months, like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really.
How did you overcome that?
It was really rough because I realized at the moment that everything was happening, it distills down to you what's important in your life when you have to face death or you have to experience death. And I realized at that moment that I would regret not writing my book. And it was really funny because it just became so crystal clear for me. And so I went, you know what? There's only so much you can control when you have cancer. As many of your viewers will know, it's something that sometimes is just out of your control. But I thought, I'm going to see if I'm any good at this. And so I took my first writing class. Luckily, I was very good at it. So I lucked out, and I used writing to really help me heal and get through processing the grief over my mom, and also with my cancer as well, because I wasn't sure. I was only given a 50% chance to live. And so I wasn't sure if I'd make it, which really just made me want to not delay anymore.
It's no laughing matter, right? It's no laughing matter. Okay, I can understand that you lost a job, but the fact is that you can find another job, right? And nobody is indispensable. That's what my old boss used to say. Don't think that you are indispensable, because one thing you have to remember is that if you put your hand in a bucket of water and you pull it out, that space will be covered. So even though you are so good at something in your job, it's not yours. And so, that just put in perspective. But you had an illness to worry about, and you had your mother who passed So I can understand that the grief you're feeling. But how did you overcome, and how were you feeling when you were going through this? I mean, I'm sorry to ask you this in
Oh,
public,
no, it's okay. Yeah.
but how would you feel when doctor said, oh, you have a 50% chance? What were you feeling at that time?
At first, I was devastated. Just, I had been diagnosed at 38. I felt like I still had so much more to do in my life. Cancer doesn't run in my family, so it just completely came out of nowhere. And then I remember sitting there as they were giving me all of the findings about my cancer is extremely rare. There's only about 150 cases in the US a year. That gives you an idea of how rare it is. And in all of the cases, as I was looking through it, I went, you know what? I could either feel that there's a 50% chance I could die, or I could feel there's a 50% chance I could live. And I decided to go on the positive side and just shift my thinking and went, I'm going to survive this. And that's how I kind of moved forward on it.
So tell me, when people are given these choices, we have these choices every single day: coffee or tea in the morning, wake up early, wake up late, journal or not journal, exercise or not exercise. And I know what we are talking about is pretty serious. It's not just that matter of choice, but that choice is given to us every single moment of our life. How do you, as a person going through this, figure out or think about, I'm going to look at this positively? How long did that process take?
I think for me, it was within the first few months as we were looking at what type of treatment might be available after it, because I had surgery to remove my tumor, but chemo doesn't work on my type of cancer, and the opportunity was potentially radiation. And so it was during all those treatment discussions that I really started thinking about, what's my survival rate? What does this mean for my future? How am I going to move forward with this? And I think for me, I decided that I could go on the negative side, but that doesn't get me anywhere. It doesn't change the outcome. It doesn't move me forward. It doesn't help me process anything. So for me, I've always been relatively a positive person, but for me, being able to turn it to the other side, to the positive side, the benefits there, I didn't know how it was going to work out, but the benefits there were so much more than being on the negative. And I think that's that switch that you were saying, when people think about that every day, what are you going to get, and how are things going to improve if you're in this mind space, and how are they going to improve if you're in this mind space? And the positive mind space really for me was the thing I think that helped me beat it 4 times now.
4 times.
Yep.
Not once, but 4 times. Oh my God. My hat's off to you. Thank you so much for sharing that. So you said that it was therapeutic for you to put your book out
Yep.
there. So let's talk about how that process went. So you wanted to write a book. You had a story before this happened, but I think you went into writing a book and you talk about your cancer in that too.
Yeah, what I did is that my book isn't necessarily about my cancer, but uh, there's a lot of my experiences. And this is what's so great about being a writer, and for so many writers, is that we can take these experiences, like the grief over losing my mom, the cancer experiences I had, and we can put those even into fiction books for our characters to experience it. When my characters face death, I know what that feels like. And I can infuse that with such an authenticity that my readers really pick up on it. And I've had readers that have read through my books and have cried at parts I've cried at, writing and other things like that. And I think that's one of the things that writers can do, is take our real life experiences and put them either into nonfiction or a fiction book. And it really is a healing process, because we get to re-experience those things and move forward with them even more in our writing.
So you are now cancer free, and you've written
Yeah.
how many books?
So I have 2 books that I've published. So those are out there, the first 2 books of my trilogy. And so far together, I think they have over 100 5-star reviews on Amazon. So they're doing really well. I'm very excited. And I'm working on the 3rd book of the trilogy, which is going to come out next year.
That's awesome. So okay, so now let's get to the niches part of it, right? You've always wanted to write. If this catastrophe hadn't happened, what would you have written about?
I have to be completely honest. I don't know if I ever would have pursued my dreams if this catastrophe hadn't happened. I think I would have had a drawer full of interesting stories that I probably wouldn't have done anything with, because I probably would have kept putting things off. And that's one of the things, because I'm also an intuitive storytelling coach. That's one of the things I talk to my clients about, is that, you know, our time here isn't assured. We really need to pursue what brings us joy. But I think that in general, my stories, if this catastrophe hadn't happened, would still be filled with magical elements, would still be filled with the power of relationship and friendship and how we're stronger together. I think that's always been kind of part of my life. So those are a lot of themes in my books. And looking back on the past with older eyes, a lot of times the things we remember that happened to us and we look back on them, they're a little different. And so it's amazing the things we hold on to that take power over us that really aren't necessarily as important when we really look back.
That's so wonderful, because I meet people who want to, and then they have a whole laundry list of things, right? And in my line of work as the niche navigator, I help people, one, ground themselves, figure out what they discover their why. Why is it that you want to do a certain thing? What is the reason behind that? Once you figure that, now you're going to figure out how and what are you going to do about it, right? And so you kind of work on along the same lines, but you teach the people how to write. So give us three pieces of advice that you would share with anybody listening out there who has a story and is thinking about it but haven't. Like you said, you went to a writing class. What if somebody doesn't want to or can't afford to go to a writing class? Then what do they do?
Well, I would say for my pieces of advice, first of all, I would say to remember that writing is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So give yourself some grace. A little progress every single day is important. So don't give up, because that's what I find a lot of writers do. They want it like done tomorrow, and it takes a while. And so to keep going, you don't need a writing class. Everybody has an innate ability at something when it comes to writing, and then you can work on the rest if you want. There's a lot of free resources online. I also have a free Facebook writing group that gives writing tips and trainings and whatnot. There's a lot of stuff out there. The second thing I would say is to be vulnerable in your writing. No matter what you're writing, whether it's memoir, whether it's personal development, a short story, even a blog or a post on social media, when we're vulnerable, that's when we can really connect with our audience, because being vulnerable allows what I call that lean in factor, where people will lean in because they want to know more and they want to connect with you. And when you have that connection and that empathy, that's when things can really change, because there's understanding that's comes from that connection. All of us have so many short stories to share, especially after what we've been going through with COVID, that it's important to realize that we're not alone. And you might have to write alone, but you don't have to be a writer alone.
Okay, that's awesome. People have always told me when I wrote my book last year, and they always said, you know, how did you write a book? And I was like, I just started writing. Right? I've contributed in group book projects, and I've contributed in essay writing, and I've short stories here, there, and everywhere. I'm not a blog writer, but I don't know if I'm that effective, but who knows, right? But so the thing is, I wrote my book because I was talking about the niche principles. It's not a story, it's just what my experiences were and what my pillars were. And I would tell people why, to me, it didn't make sense why people wouldn't just start writing. And people tell me you have to be in a frame of mind, or you have to do this. You just mentioned that you have to, it's It's something every day. It's a marathon. You have to work at it every single day. What advice do you give those people who have a story but haven't yet taken that first step, or put the pen to the paper and begun the first letter I, or the, or once,
Yeah, I would say that depending on what they're writing, I have different advice based on fiction, memoir, personal development. But just in general, I just always say to start putting down your thoughts. They don't have to be perfect. Maybe in the beginning, it's just bullet points of ideas. I also talk about the fact of having different notebooks for different types of books you might want to write, because we all have multiple books within us. And I know many writers that have a memoir in them, and then a fiction book, and then they want to do a personal development book. And it's hard for them to keep organized. So I always suggest to start jotting down your thoughts and impressions and things that come to you in these different notebooks based on the book you're writing, so you can keep organized, and you start that faucet of creativity going. And you'll find, this is what I find too, is I'll be doing the dishes and all of a sudden an idea comes to me. I'll be out with friends and something else comes to me. Once you start thinking about writing and actually starting to do it, you will want to do it more, and more will flow. So my advice is just start, carve out 15 minutes a day, see how it goes, and just keep starting to write stuff down, and you'll be surprised at how much starts to accumulate, and you might actually get excited about an idea you didn't even realize you had.
That's awesome. That's an awesome tip. And that's partly how I did it also, is like I didn't like write, but I would get thoughts. And my husband was sick, right? And I would go to the doctor's offices with him, or he would be in dialysis centers. And some days he wouldn't just come out on time. So I would be in the car waiting for him, or, when your loved one is sick, you're all constantly waiting, right? And so what was happening to me was I had a lot of time, and thoughts would just fly by. It was like, for me, thoughts are like I'm on a freeway and all these signs go by and those signs are those little thoughts. So I would start writing things down, because I tend to forget, and I just keep writing things down. And one day when he was in the hospital, I started looking through, and I was like, I have so much stuff. And what I did was I used my phone, and for anybody who's listening and wants a tip from me, I used the app Evernote, the free version of it, and I just started writing and just add bullet points to it. It allows you to do that, and it's pretty awesome, because if you can't, I think it allows you to two devices. One is on the computer and then one on your phone, but just keep saying. Now, one thing I don't like about it is you can't give voice notes. So you can't do that with that. But if you want that, so what I used to do is I used to text. I created a group of texts with my daughter and then removed her. And then I would just put voice messages on there, and then copy and paste and put it in on Evernote, because it saves it there. It was the easiest thing I could do. And then somebody else told me that you could use Google Docs and then just add to it and then use the voice function there. And so whatever tips you have, you don't have to have different journals. You can have different files, if you will, and just add to it, or use different color coordination. But the thing is, whatever floats your boat, just start somewhere. The idea, the thing that I teach in my niche programs is that you have an idea, you plan it, you then initiate it, and then you execute it. It's a pie. You have to have a pie. And even if you don't have a plan, if you just start writing, eventually a picture will begin to form. It's like the doodler, right? It's just
exactly.
And something comes up, and it looks like a horse, or I'm sorry.
That's okay. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right, is that you never know what's going to come out as you're starting to write. And it's so important, as you said, to use whatever method works for you. There's no rules. Whatever works for you, it keeps you writing and keeps you inspired. Go ahead and do that, and try different things, like what you mentioned with Evernote.
Yeah, and so then you've shared tips with us. You've said, go ahead and just start writing. Make sure that you have 3 different genres. have you, are your stories fiction, or how do you, what are your, is this your real life?
Yeah, so my stories are fiction for the trilogy. I'm working on a personal development book right now, which is about opening up your creativity. So that'll be a nonfiction book, but my books are fiction. And I found that a lot of times people think, well, fiction can't transform people, but fiction can transform people. I mean, think about how many fiction books that have changed people's perspective and lives, and just the way that they look at things. And so, I thoroughly enjoy writing anything that's out there. But yeah, my first two books are fiction related, and they're a bunch of genres. So they're mystery, they're suspense, they're romance, they're women's fiction. It's just really an exciting group. So I've had a lot of people say, I don't usually read whatever they think it is. And then they're like, oh my God, but this is so good. And men are loving them too.
Okay, so people who are standing on the sidelines, one thing for them to say, what for, in anything they do. I talk about pie. What do you talk about?
I think anybody who's standing on the sidelines, if you want something to get you motivated, I always think about, if you died tomorrow, what would you regret? And the reason why I think about that is, and it's funny, it's not funny, haha, it's amazing when you start to actually think about it, even though it's morbid, it really reveals what your soul is calling for you to do. And that might inspire you to take that step from the sidelines and step forward. Because you know what, if you've been able to do it, if I've been able to do it with everything that we're juggling and everybody else out there, there's no time like now. Don't wait.
I love those. Tracy, is there a question that I haven't asked you yet that you want to tell something to the world?
Well, I think one of the things I wanted to mention, because I do have a lot of people that say this to me, I hear a lot of, I don't have the time. Okay. I don't have the time to write. It's all a matter of priority, not time. And think about your own life, for everybody who's listening. When you've had to all of a sudden do something or shift something around, you've suddenly found the time to do it, whether it be working out, taking care of your kids, doing something else, a different job. We can find time if we need to. And so remember, it's an amount of prayer. It's a priority situation. So just think about where you can carve out 15 minutes of something else that you're doing. Maybe it's watching TV, and spend that time writing and see how it feels.
I love that last piece of advice. You have to find priority. So here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, this has been an amazing interview. She is awesome. Tracy, if we can ask you to add the groups that you mentioned for people who want to join, and then the names of the books, please, so then we can get those. And how do people find you?
Many different ways. You can find me on my website at tracyshearer.com. I'm also on Facebook. I also have Instagram and Twitter accounts as well. Some people love to follow me there, and those are under Tracey L. Shearer, because apparently Tracey Shearer was taken. What's up with that? I put the L in there.
You know what? There's unique people, and then there's semi-unique, and then there's unique, right? And you are the unique. There's an L in there. I think that shows that you are a leader and people have to follow you. Here, there it is.
There you go.
So you've created in this interview, you've created for me the gist of now writing another book, right? I've got some done. I haven't finished it and kind of shelved it for a while, but now it's like, I need to get this done. So this is awesome, right? And then do you coach people as well in doing this? Do you have workshops and stuff?
Yes, I do. I'm running currently a mastermind. It's called Book Brilliance, and I'm taking a group of writers through writing their first personal development memoir book, which is so exciting. So I'm doing that. I'll be running that again next year as well. It's a 6-month mastermind, but I also do one-on-one coaching to help people with their specific projects, including also reading and critiquing some of their work to give them feedback. I find that that's sometimes one of the most important things is to have somebody else's eyes on your work. And when you're first starting out, you can be kind of nervous. And so I create a really safe and secure space to give you that guidance. And so I love to do the one-on-one coaching as well. And I'll have more programs coming out through my free Facebook group as well.
I have another question just before we go.
Yeah.
You said there's so many people writing books, and then you hear the negative part of it or the other part of it where people are never going to make money selling their books, or people are never going to find out how many books can you sell. You're never going to be, it's not going to be like Stephen King. You hear that part, and then that sometimes discourages people. What do you tell people who discourage people?
I would say, first of all, that writers, the people that have to write, don't write for money. They write because they have to write. So if it's in your soul to write, write. Don't let the money issue hold you back. I can tell you from experience, because I had an agent, lost an agent because she had to retire, and then I self-published. So I've seen both aspects of the publishing world, traditional and how much you make there, and self-publishing. You can actually make a lot more on self-publishing because you don't have to deal with the publishing house. But the more books you write, it's a domino effect. So I would say start the first book of your word empire and keep building on it, because I sold a lot of books with Entwine, my first book. When I put out Raven, I sold a ton more of Entwine, because it was people would read Raven and go, I have to read Entwine, or they'd buy them as a set. When the third one comes out and I do a box set, I'm going to sell even more. So I would say, remember that as you keep building on your word empire, more and more monies will come in that way. And then also too, if you get anything optioned for a TV show or whatnot, you can make a lot of money there as well. And you can have that as a self-published author as well. You don't have to be through a publishing house. So there's so many opportunities out there. So don't let the specific dollar sign stop you from writing, because it's only going to get better the more that you write.
So the advice you're saying is just write.
Yep.
And things will happen as you keep going.
Yep.
I like that. And so thank you so much. You can, she's going to share the group names and the names of the books, Entwined and Raven. And, I'm going to start reading those.
They're fun. And I really appreciate you having me. Thanks so much for your time today too.
Welcome. So ladies and gentlemen, take the first step. In anything that you are thinking. It's not just writing, but if it's writing is your passion, then here you have a good guru who can help you through that. But anything that you do, have a pie, plan, initiate, execute, and start jumping into it, because you can plan all day, you can initiate all day, but if you don't execute, nothing happens. So start that first word, once, I, there, something, just write it. Thank you, everybody. Until we see you next week, please share, share, subscribe to our channel. We'll bring you another guest next week with a different perspective, a different niche, and a different just conversation. Let's talk about this. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Munira's Musings with your host, Munira Zahabi. If you enjoyed our show, please share and subscribe to this channel. And for more content, please join our Facebook group.